Paridhi. And with this, we conclude with the first session of this conference. Moving on to the second session, this paper, the first paper of the second session, has been co-written by Dr. Priya Vaidya and Dr. Smita Shukla. Dr. Priya is an associate professor at Department of Philosophy in the University of Mumbai, and she is also a visiting faculty for MA Leadership Science course at Chanakya International Institute of Leadership, again at the University of Mumbai. Dr. Smita is the director of the IQAC, Internal Quality Assurance Cell at the University of Mumbai, and is also an honorary director. She is also a professor at the Alkesh Dinesh Modi Institute for Financial Management Studies in the University of Mumbai. Ma'am, would you please present your screen or begin with your presentation?
Greetings from India, from both of us. We're going to present our paper on value-based consultancy in business, the Indian philosophical approach. Before we begin with our presentation, I would like to start this session with a story, and a story which perhaps most of you may be aware about, but there is a connect to the story in the context to which we are going to take it forward. So like all stories, this story also starts with once upon a time. And once upon a time, there was a merchant, there was a person in the village who was very ambitious, and he had many dreams, and he wanted to accumulate more land. And he was just trying his best to accumulate it more and more. And it was after some time when he started with the transaction of land, he met a person who said that we're ready to sell our land at a very cheap price. And if you want it, you could please buy it from us. And this person was very happy. He thought that it was a great kind of an opportunity. And they said there's only one condition, and that condition is you have to run. And the land, the particular dimension, how much you run, that is your land. And only one condition, you have to come back before sunset. So this man said, okay, this is a very easy kind of a thing and it's doable. So he told his servant that soon we're going to be rich. And then he started running and running. And he ran because he was always dreaming of more land, more money. And what happened was he forgot that he had to return before sunset. The minute he realized, he turned and started running faster and faster. But after some time, when he was about to touch the photo finish line, he was gasping for breath and he just passed away. He couldn't, he was dead. And people who had gathered started laughing, saying, what kind of a person, a greedy man. The servant looked at this person who was his master. He took him to the grave and he tried to put him. And he had this fundamental question, how much land does man need? This is a story by Leo Tolstoy, year 1886. Today, 2022. We still see that this particular dimension of clarity in thinking and connect to life is not yet established. With this context, we are going to look at value-based consultancy in business, the Indian philosophical approach. Kindly allow me to share our slides. Are you able to see the slides?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So as this particular dimension is very clear, the objectives of this paper are to review erosion of human values in business. Example, India. That is, erosion of human values in business continues in different parts of the world, unfortunately. But we are going to focus on India. The second part of our presentation, as we try to reflect, is to establish the relevance of Purushartha model to locate and eliminate the fallacy. And we've talked about the fallacy, and to strengthen value-based consultancy in business. So what we try to do is, there is a problem, there is a dimension to the problem, and we have tried to look at the solution. Since Dr. Smita is from the management dimension and I'm from philosophy, there's a synthesis which the listeners will see as we present the paper. Over to Dr. Smita.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vaidya. I'm Smita Shukla, Faculty for Management, and attempting with Dr. Priya Vaidya to get some insights from philosophy. When we look at this business context of defining that business of business is business. So whenever we talk about that, what are the goals of business, they're always generally defined in negative terms. Yes, we talk about wealth creation, but at the same time, we talk about profit maximization. When we talk about wealth creation, we are too much focused on wealth creation of shareholders. The businesses not necessarily are always looking at interest of all the shareholders. Is it necessary for businesses to actually hold values? Again, that is an issue. When we talk about ethics in business, whether really that is important, again, there are perceptions which are different across countries and even those who run and manage businesses. So what we have tried to do is, right in the beginning of this discussion, we tried to create a journey map for us to understand that is there any context of values, importance of values when we look at overall context of business. And for that, we did literature analysis that what kind of discussion is existing about business values and mapping them with the human values. And this result which we could create, this model which we could create, which is kind of conceptual model on which our paper builds the discussion, is in front of you. So there are different quality systems which various countries follow. Say for example, when we talk about Deming Japan or MB and QA, USA, etc. So there are different quality parameters which are set to define whether or not the business is being done properly, whether or not the quality initiatives are being maintained. And a mapping was done in one of the studies to understand that across various quality models, what are the common parameters, and some common parameters were identified, and these common parameters to define that whether or not the business is being done appropriately. When I say appropriately in terms of quality, these parameters were that there is leadership and constancy of purpose, or customer focus is existing. There is focus on quality and continuous learning, innovation and improvement. There is employee involvement in development, partnership development. There is the business is agile. There is focus on future. At the same time, there is context of social responsibility in the business. There is focus on result and creating value. The business is also a system, process, and fact driven, and the management is also inspired by the same. And we again tried to see that are there any studies which also say that when you talk about quality, can they be linked to value parameters, which are not quality parameters but value parameters? And again, we realize yes, that kind of mapping is possible. And we mapped again these common quality parameters which were identified across 16 quality models used in various countries. The value parameters which we could link to was, say for example, to leadership and constancy of purpose. We could map leadership effectiveness, customer focus, quality and continuous learning, innovation and improvement. We could map that there has to be a stakeholders balance, there has to be a process integrity, and so on and so forth. So what you see here on the table is that conceptual connection which we tried to build between the business values, the core ethical values, and what kind of parameters can define that whether or not these values are being followed by business. And can there be some mapping parameters to measure also that whether or not these values, which start from quality, move to ethical human values, then can be linked to business operations in terms of ethical parameters, and finally can be connected to certain evaluation parameters. Dr. Vaidya, can I request you to move to the next slide? Yeah, thank you. So here you can see mapping of all the core values, quality values, which we have spoken. And based on that, then we moved on to the next discussion, which will be now taken forward by Dr. Vaidya. Over to you, Dr. Vaidya.
Yeah. So here comes the very important question. When we look at the discussion as it has tried to manifest, what is and what ought to be? When we look at ethics, this question becomes the most important. And how are we trying to look at it in context to our presentation? When we look at to review the erosion of human values, what exactly we try to say in context to business? And when we try to look at it, we also try to reflect the environment, what kind of harm then business is done to environment, to human relationship, to future goals, and to other factors. In fact, there is a philosophical question here that when we talk about profit, when a businessman speaks about profit and his focus is on that dimension of profit, he tends to ignore this particular dimensions in many ways. And that's why, is it necessary to deconstruct what we understand by profit and reconstruct another dimension of profit also, is what we have been discussing and thinking. In this context, to review erosion of human values in business, in the world and India, this process is on, and we're trying to focus in India a case study analysis, which Dr. Smita Shukla will try to reflect. Over to Dr. Shukla.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vaidya. So we have looked at 3 business case studies. These are all companies which are either operating in India or were operating in India. So when we talk about business ethics issue, one case study which we will like to put forth is that of a company which was in aviation sector, Kingfisher Airlines. This company was introduced in the market way back. It was in context, when you look at it, it is not a very historical company, not one which was started in early 1950s or 40s. This is the company which was created and established in the decade of 2000. This company offered aviation services in India by adding what we call as a context of a lot of flamboyance to the idea of traveling, where we all knew that India at that point of time, and is still is aspirational, and they want to experience best of the quality in terms of what aviation or other kind of service experiences can offer them. So this company was established during the decade of 2000, and by the time it was 2012, this company had to wind up on account of a fraud kind of scenario which was created on account of the way the operations were managed within the company. This company, though had business, the idea of business at the center, but in terms of doing the business with the right approach, that kind of approach was missing. This company was running in losses. Generally, we say that when a company is running in losses, it needs to look at what's going wrong. It needs to, in case required, it needs to restructure the business. The company did not do any kind of inward analysis and kept on borrowing from various financial institutions. The company, in fact, the financial position became so bad that there were several months that the company was not able to pay salaries to its employees. And at the same time, while it was in such a situation where it was not able to pay its employees, the overall parent group, which is United Breweries Group, again a well-known group in India, which is producing liquor and wine and such kind of business in India and doing very well. This parent group kept on funding what we call as craze in India, that is a cricket team, a private cricket team, IPL team, the Royal Challengers of Bangalore, then one Formula One racing team, Force India, where these activities are money guzzlers, and it was funding these while the employees were not getting paid. The promoter of the company was known for his flamboyance. He was known for throwing parties. He was known for coming out every year with what we call as Kingfisher calendars, which used to carry flashy models, etc. But in terms of what it was doing for society, that context was very low. And this company, when it borrowed from the banks, it put on collateral such kind of assets, which in fact either were already eroded of value or today hold no value. Say, for example, the brand itself was kept as collateral. So the brand value, which was several thousand crore at some point of time, today almost zero. Or say, for example, some helicopters were kept as collateral, and these helicopters were not even in running condition. So when you talk about business ethics issue, we are presenting this as our beginning case to say that when you refer to businesses, can ethics be important? And in case, let's say, if we want to map a way of running business appropriately, if a business is not holding business-centric approach, or is not employee-centric, or is not society-centric, or is low on ethics, what kind of scenario it can create for itself and otherwise for the markets. Over to you, Dr. Vaidya.
Yeah, thanks. So when we talk about this particular dimension of the case, and when we start looking and asking some fundamental questions, and when we look at the Purushartha model, which means Purushartha is object of human pursuit, the goal of human life. It is focusing on dharma, that is righteousness, artha, that is wealth, kama, that is momentary pleasure, and moksha, liberation. I'm sure the learned audience will have a question for me. How do you connect something which was so prominently followed as ethical theory in ancient India in context to business? So I've tried to reinterpret it in context to business when we look at righteousness, that is the value-based approach in context to business, wealth generation and management, but with a focus on values, ethics. When we talk about innovation and inspiration, it is not to be impulsive, but a lot of introspection and deeper thinking is required. And when we talk about liberation, we talk about a company which travels beyond profit, which believes in competition for itself, which focuses on excellence, which focuses on mentoring other companies. And in this context, when we look at business, it is for profit and welfare. There is also concern for natural wealth. If there are many trees which are destroyed, that dimension of wealth is simply going away from us. So good business tries to review, and there's a connect with nature. When we look at karma also, there is self-good, which you cannot ignore because man is a selfish being. But here also focus on happiness of maximum. And when we look at business, it is not just for the individual, but also for the country and for the world. And if this is the dimension when we look at the Purushartha model, the Purushartha model which we've tried to look at, we've also tried to use this model to locate the problem. That is, here is a Purushartha model which focuses on harmony. And when we try to focus on harmony, it implies maintain the matter-spirit balance, that is the balance of the physical, when we look at the material and spiritual world. The focus is on righteousness. And when we talk about wealth and pleasure in life, that is fine, but it is integrated with it. And moving from self-centeredness to selflessness, the me to we approach. Now, most of us know that present scenario is something different, and we have tried to develop our own fallacy. Here is a fallacy which is based on our dimensional understanding of Purushartha model, and we've been able to develop a fallacy. Why this fallacy? It is a fallacy of priority. This fallacy is very relevant today because it is focusing on the lopsided thought process, where we are trying to say it is only for profit, it's only for money, and only important factor is money and money alone. So if a business person asks, so what is wrong if we try to only focus on profit? There is something wrong, as we very well know, that if nature is affected, if human relationships are affected, what is the quality of life? How is it going to be? The focus is not on righteousness. So the focus is not on dharma. The focus is on artha, that is wealth and momentary pleasure. And we all know that the result of this is corruption, environmental degradation, cutthroat competition, and you name it, and we have it. So the million-dollar question is, how are we going to resolve it? And we have tried to locate the problem and the fallacy, and we're going to use the same Purushartha model to eliminate this fallacy of priority. And how are we going to do this? There's a method to train to locate fallacy. Human nature is we are not able to at times accept that we think in a wrong way. And thus, can we train people to be more objective? Can we train people to be more connected to the environment and to others? So the mission here is to focus on righteousness. And when we try to do this, the focus is to be mindful in reading documents, in reflecting and transforming. So it is not just money, but the environment, human relationship, country, and the world. And what will be the roadmap? This is not for the first time you're saying that there are only bad industries. There are many good industries in the world and in India, and there are best practices in business which can help and train people to develop a roadmap which is interesting. And more about this best practice and good business, over to Dr. Smita. Hello, am I audible?
Ma'am,
yes,
Priya,
Dr. Vaidya. Yes, Dr. Vaidya. So I forgot to unmute myself. So
yes, so we are moving from here to this. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Vaidya. So I am taking forward again the discussion and presenting the second case study, which we are linking to what Dr. Vaidya spoke about. So when you talk about doing the right thing in the business context, there are again business examples. In fact, they are present world over. It's not that these are just Indian case studies. They will always be some context in USA or Sweden or some other country across the globe. So this Indian company which we are talking about and discussing again is a world-known company. This is a technology company, Infosys Technologies, the company which was established by 7 engineers who said that it is IT can change Indian market. who had a dream, who had vision, and at the same time believed that there can always be an ethical way of doing business. Today, when we talk about this company, it's not that this company has compromised on the the business idea per se. When I say what business generally centers around when you talk about management or financial management, etc., generally it is profit centric, it is wealth centric. So it's not that this company has abandoned that you need not earn profit. In fact, this is one of the most profitable companies listed in Indian markets. It is also a well-known company across global markets. This is the first company which listed from India at NASDAQ. This is the again one of the very few companies moving from India in the NASDAQ 100 index. The overall worth of the company, that is market capitalization, is over 100 billion. This company at the same time is quality centric. That is, it believes in agility, it believes in always learning, improving, continuous improvement in terms of building skills, transferring transferring skills to the employees, sorry, innovation, building innovation ecosystem, etc. This company is also employee centric. Now, when I say employee centric, it has almost 3 lakh employees, which are based in India and globally. And this company was the first Indian company to come out with a stock option program. And in fact, one of the first Indian companies to create India's first salaried millionaires. This company also has a customer-centric approach, which and it believes in giving and offering customer delight by delivering whatever services it is offering at very high performance parameters. This company is known to be society-centric. It believes in transparent business practices. It is known for inclusion. It is known for its adaptability. During COVID-19 pandemic, the way it quickly moved on and connected with its employees and gave them facilities to work from home and being in right frame of mind. This company did very well. And in that context, when you look at can this be a good example of doing the right thing in business? Yes, maybe. Yes, Dr. Vaidya.
Yeah, and there is this particular dimension also of Fab India, which Dr. Shukla will reflect upon.
Ma'am,
So, yes.
I'm very sorry to interrupt, but there are about 18 minutes left, and I see that you have 3 more slides. So if so, to enable the question answer round, could you just, if it's possible, could you please speed up?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, ma'am.
We have only a few slides. We will just complete it. Over to Dr. Shukla.
Yes, Dr. Vaidya, thank you so much. So the next company which we are presenting here is Fab India. This is a completely different kind of business model based company. So this is a multi-category store which holds brands which are not created by known names across markets, but it holds brands which are created by rural artisans. So it promotes products which are fashion products, lifestyle products, home decor products, but these are sourced from rural artisans. This company is quality centric at the same time because whatever it sells in its stores in terms of quality parameter, there is absolutely no compromise. This company is again employee centric. 700 employees were given again the stock option program when it completed 50 years. It is customer centric because again customer is there in the context and very, very important focus of business. And finally, it is society centric. So as I said, it sources from rural artisans. It has connect with over 50,000 rural artisans from which it is sourcing. And when you talk about who holds the shares of the company, there are around 17 community-owned clusters which are major shareholders of this company. So this company again believes in doing the right thing when you reflect on whether business can be done righteously. Over to you, Dr. Vaidya.
So we are coming to the end of this presentation and very keen to receive the questions. So value-based consultancy, the focus is on peace, progress, prosperity, and the million-dollar question, what next? May we all be guided by good thoughts. May we practice harmony in thought, word, and deed. Gratitude to all. Thank you very much for kind listening.
Thank you, Priya ma'am and Smita ma'am, for this wonderful paper. We've been learning about dharma, moksha, and how they're the highest virtues, and then followed by artha and kama. This is what the ancients have told us, but that you brought it to the modern perspective and showed how it's actually true here kind of opened a new perspective entirely for me. So thank you. Now we will begin with the question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Right, there's a question from Mr. Akshat Kapoor. I saw your question.
Good evening, ma'am. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. My question is regarding the concept of moksha in the whole Purushartha model in business ethics. So as I see it, it's a very spiritual value, a very an individual spiritual value. How do you articulate the concept for moksha in a business model? Could you please shed some more light?
Yeah, sure. So when we look at the dimension of moksha in context to the ancient dimension of the theory, it means liberation. But as I stated in my presentation, in context to business, when we even talk about liberation, we are trying to focus on elevation. And this elevation is from the dimension of moving from the gross to the refined. So here we are trying to focus that business, when we look at business, profit is the focus. But we see that there are many, many business houses and business leaders who move beyond profit. And there is something where we try to focus on progress. We talk about social responsibility, which they genuinely do it. So this kind of elevation, this kind of liberation comes from a leader and his team. And this is where the dimension of moksha, that is when you start understanding the very purpose of life, that when we talk about living for itself, the end in itself, the exploration which takes place. In that context, I feel every human being has those dimensions. And only thing is there is some insecurity, there is something which pulls us behind. And so in that context, if we develop a thinking which focuses on this particular dimension, I would like to mention the great Shankaracharya in the Shankar Bhashya. He has spoken about a particular dimension, tata kim, what next, what next? If you have a bungalow, you want 2 bungalows. If you have a car, you want 5 cars. And this question remains unanswered. And so this tata kim, what next, is not just for oneself, but for community. Thank you.
Can I add on to that? Though my discipline is management and Dr. Vaidya's philosophy. Though I will not be talking about moksha from the perspective Dr. Vaidya has spoken about, but there are examples within Indian thought and philosophy. Say, for example, Gandhiji spoke about the concept of trusteeship. And he said that in case if we want businesses to become contributors to society and growth, the idea of real growth, the business should not be done from the perspective of personal gain. It should be done as if you are trustee of wealth for the society, and you should take it forward that way. And there are companies which have believed in that philosophy, and though not completely, but have done business with that kind of context, and they are quite well respected and have done well as well. Say, for example, Tata Sons, when we talk about, so overall trust, it is not about the individual gain. It is more about how do you contribute to overall society and all stakeholders. Yeah, thank you, Akshat.
Thank you, ma'am. While we're waiting for questions, I was hoping I could ask one of my own. You've talked about profit orientation, profit orientation is basically a capitalist view of the world and how it works. So by suggesting companies that work, some companies such as Fab India and Infosys, are you proposing a more socialist kind of company? And won't that kind of restrict the personal freedom of a person?
Okay, I'll take that question. So within business philosophy, there is also this context of business philosophy. There has been a lot of criticism of this idea of that, is it that the sole goal of businesses is profit? And there are multiple ways in which people have looked at this context of what profit is all about. And now there is more or less this kind of acceptance across the board when we refer to financial management theory, etc., that profit cannot be the goal. In fact, even in economic philosophy, we now say profit need not be the only goal of the company, and the goal should be broader. And that is how the concept of building wealth. But again, that concept was slightly restrictive because you were talking about wealth of the shareholders. So within business philosophy, now we talk about building business for all stakeholders. We talk about economic value added, which brings in context of various stakeholders as well. So we are not trying to say you don't look at the parameter of profit, but the fact is that when you talk about overall evolution of business philosophy, even within business, it's not considered as a good idea just to follow only the goal of profit. And the fact is, as Dr. Vaidya spoke about, that when you make that as the sole business aim, you do so much harm. You don't care about environment, you don't care about your employees, you don't sometimes you don't care about your customers, and that itself is not sustainable. So in case if you wish to do good business does not necessarily mean that profitable business. It means sustainable business. You have to get over this idea of that business should be done only for profit.
Thank you, ma'am. That answers my question perfectly. We have another question from Dr. Raja. Dr. Raja, could you please unmute and ask your question?
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. Very, very interesting. I'm wondering, see, I can imagine a company saying, yeah, well, spiritual values, moksha, that's all great, but really, we want profit. So, of course, they would not openly say this, or maybe they would not openly say this, but really that's what's going on. So I wonder sort of, it would, of course, be an excellent point to make, if one could make it, that, actually working in the interest, not just of the own company, but, more broadly speaking, for the interest and for the good of a broader community, actually creates more profit, like overall more profit. Maybe not in the short term, but sort of in the long run. Is that and then one can say like, hey, and this is a way of doing it here, value-based. And one could even sort of, I suppose, of course, I have only a very sort of scanty knowledge of economic theories, but sort of I'm thinking of John Nash, the John Nash equilibrium, where you say, well, it's not Adam Smith, it's John Nash. So we have to work not just in terms of our own interest, but sort of in terms of or for the interests of many. So what I'm wondering whether this is a strategy that you're pursuing.
Dr. Vaidya, will you like to answer that? But let me, before I invite you to answer this, let me just build in my context, and then Dr. Vaidya can take over. So Dr. Vaidya, during her presentation, spoke about this fallacy. She said that there is this fallacy of profit, and she will better explain better than me, because she is actually the philosopher and I'm a management thinker. And she said that when you try to define that what exactly is your goal, so when you look at it from a narrow context, when you look at it from the shallow context, it looks like as if Goal of earning more and more profit is the ideal goal. But if you get over that, and it's difficult to get over, and you yourself stated that it's very difficult, because ultimately, while you are sitting in the boardroom, the shareholders are going to say, okay, tell me how much is the profit earned this year. But when you get over this narrow context, what happens is you realize that in case you want the business to be really sustainable, and sustainability doesn't mean 5 years, 10 years, it means the business should grow as the society grows, as the markets grow. The business should continue to earn respect of all stakeholders, because with that, it will be able to possibly contribute more to the shareholders' wealth than what it can do by narrowly looking at profit. That is my context, which I wanted to bring in. Dr. Vaidya, how will you like to answer the question? Over to you.
I have already stated in my presentation, when we talk about moksha, we are talking about elevation, liberation. And I had stated that the focus is from me to we. And that's where we are trying to say that the more we are able to, I mentioned that mentoring other organizations also. So there are certain instances where at a point, a good leader understands that profit is not the only thing. And I think that good leader is one who is able to look within and focus. And fortunately, we see that many companies have benefited due to this perspective. And as I have already said, that it is the concept of moksha or liberation. It is more meaningful today because we are trying to relook at the dimension of it, especially when we look at the material and spiritual balance, the harmony. So I look at theory of Purushartha as a value-based model for harmony. Thank you.
May I follow up quickly? So I'm sold on moksha, right? So I mean, I'm just imagining someone, in the business world thinking, yeah, well, that sounds all very good, but really I'm interested in profit. So I was the question that I was asking was, can one trick such a person into going with this by way of saying, well, if you want to increase your profit, then go with a Nash equilibrium, go with the we, as you said, right? Sort of, because that is actually what will maximize your profit. So it seems then in this sense, it's not even the notion of profit that needs to be changed, but sort of they need to be nudged in a different direction, and then hopefully one hopes, right, that they will go in that direction naturally. But yeah, so because my suspicion is that making this shift, as has been said, from like this reconceptualization of what profit is, that's a very tough. It's difficult, right? But if it can be sold as, but this is where profit is actually, the way, whatever way you want to understand it, one might get there.
So I always say that things are difficult, but they're not impossible. And so good things take time to change, but the change shall take place. And to quote Gandhiji, he says, if you want to change, be the change. So each one of us, when we start bringing that change in our small and big activities every day, these reflections will certainly reach the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Smita and Dr. Priya, for your amazing presentation. It was truly amazing to listen to you.
Thank you so much.
Now we're going to move on to the second speaker of this session, and that is Dr. Simmin Bawa. She has been the head of the Department of Philosophy at Jai Hind College, Mumbai, for the past 14 years. She has presented many papers in the national and international conferences and has also published a number of papers in national and international journals. Her areas of expertise are sexual ethics, comparative religion, and philosophy of J. Krishnamurti. She is currently pursuing her PhD on the theme of sexual ethics in the Kamasutra. Dr. Simmin Bawa.
Thank you, Mihika. As I'm pursuing my PhD, I'm still not Dr. Simmin Bawa, but it does sound good. And hopefully I shall be one very soon. And thank you so much to all the organizers for giving me this opportunity. As my PhD work is around the bold topic of Kamasutra, which is a very well-known text, but sadly it's been misunderstood as just a text of mere sexual positions, whereas there is so much of philosophy. And today I'm going to explore a different area where, as I was studying this entire text, I felt that somewhere the author Vatsyayana happens to be some kind of a counselor. And because I have also developed a liking for Carl Jung, and Jung speaks about the shadow selves, the shadow archetypes. And today it's my attempt to bring in philosophical counseling, the philosophy of Vatsyayana's sexual ethics in the Kama Sutra, along with Carl Jung's shadow self. So let's see how it goes, and I'll just share my screen. I have a short presentation. I have a lot to say, so let's see how successful I am at this. And my topic, as Mihika said, that it is philosophical counseling, sexual ethics in the Kama Sutra. So the Kama Sutra, as widely understood, is not a text about sex positions alone. Rather, it is a book about the art of living, ways of attaining the goals of life, which is dharma, artha, and kama, and about finding a partner, maintaining power in a marriage, committing adultery, living with or as a courtesan, using aphrodisiac drugs, and also about various sexual positions performed during intercourse. Kama Sutra is an ancient Indian text written about 3rd and 4th century BC by Vatsyayana on carnal and sexual desires and attainment of pleasures. The text, which comprises of 7 books, seems to be written with the intention of spreading knowledge and comfort on a much controversial topic of its time, sex. The Kama Sutra was certainly one among the many erotic texts to emerge from India. However, it was not the first of its genre, nor was it the last. But what separates it from other texts such as the Kokoka Shastra and the Anangaranga is the social and psychological narratives it contains. Vatsyayana composed the book in northern India, written in the ancient Indian literary language Sanskrit. Now, there is very little on the background of Vatsyayana, but it is believed that he was a Hindu religious man who was a part of the upper caste. Now, Vatsyayana had taken pieces of earlier works from the Kama Shastra, which is traditions of works on and literature on erotics, love and pleasure, basically science of love, and he put it together. So the Kama Sutra does not claim to be the original work, but a compilation. The title Kama Sutra is composed of 2 Sanskrit words, Kama, meaning desire or pleasure, and Sutra, meaning a treatise. Now, as a treatise, the text is divided into 7 books of uneven lengths dedicated to different topics. The 7 books are further subdivided into chapters which contain the individual sutras. When we talk about Carl Jung's concept of the shadow, it is a concept which was first coined by him, he being a Swiss psychiatrist, that describes those aspects of the personality that we choose to reject and repress. For one reason or the other, we all have parts of ourselves that we don't like, or that we think society won't like. So we push those parts down into our unconscious psyches. It is this collection of repressed aspects of our identity that Jung referred to as our shadow self. The shadow or the shadow archetype is either an unconscious part of the personality that the conscious ego does not identify in itself, or the entirety of the unconscious, that is, everything of which a person is not fully conscious. So in short, the shadow is the unknown side. According to Jung, the shadow is being instinctive and irrational, is prone to psychological projections, in which a perceived personal inferiority is recognized as a perceived moral deficiency in someone else. Jung felt that if these projections remain hidden, the projection-making factor, the shadow archetype, then has a free hand and can realize its object, if it has one, or bring about some other situation characteristic of its power. These projections insulate and delude individuals by acting as a constantly thickening veil of illusion between the ego and the real world. Now, Jung's approach to the concept of psyche, the unconscious, and the individuation is avowedly psychological, relying on empirical observation, analysis, and description. But he also admits that because of the peculiar nature of the subject matter, occasionally he had involved himself in a net of reflections that ramify into the fields of philosophy, theology, comparative religion, and the human sciences in general. So Jung uses the word psyche, the total psyche, to denote the totality of all psychic processes, conscious as well as unconscious. So it involves three levels: consciousness, the personal unconscious, and the collective unconscious. Consciousness represents the side of the psyche that is primarily concerned with adaptation to external reality. The unconscious is composed of two parts. One contains forgotten, repressed material and subliminal impressions and perceptions. Jung calls this sphere the personal unconscious. The collective part of the unconscious does not include personal acquisitions, but only contents that are more or less common to all human beings, perhaps even to all animals. It's a sort of common psyche of a suprapersonal kind that is the foundation of every individual psyche. The collective unconscious is a product of generations past, the deposit of the experiences to which our ancestors have been exposed. It contains the wisdoms of the ages, our innate potential, which emerges from time to time in the form of new ideas in various creative expressions. Coming to know an unconscious is to make it conscious, but then one only knows what is and is in the becoming of the conscious. So it is important to realize that the shadow is not necessarily wholly bad, but it also displays good qualities, normal instincts and creative impulses, and realistic insights. Now, becoming conscious of the shadow, however, is a psychological problem of first moral magnitude. It demands that we hold ourselves accountable not only for what happens to us, but also for what we project, self-awareness, and therefore must be regarded as an ethical value. Anyone who perceives his shadow and his light simultaneously sees himself from two sides and thus gets in the middle, where alone, behind the opposites and in the opposite, is true reality, which sees and comprehends the whole. Now, sufficient has been spoken by the earlier speakers on what is philosophical counseling. So I think I can skip that and come to the main part. Now, introduction to the Kamasutra begins with salutations to dharma, which is acquisition of moral merit; artha, which is acquisition of wealth and property; and kama, which is love, pleasure, and sensual gratification. For a text that came after the Dharma Shastra, which is injunctions on moral and religious precepts, and the Artha Shastra, which is the art of running a city-state, to have an in-depth discourse of sexuality was itself acknowledging the shadow and embracing it, as in India, speaking of sex was a taboo and is still in some sense. So the text reveals its surprisingly modern ideas about gender and unexpectedly subtle stereotypes of feminine and masculine natures, which is again something to be lived out instead of theorizing for those times. It also reveals relatively liberal attitudes to women's education and sexual freedom, and far more complex views on homosexual acts that are suggestive by other texts of this period. Here we see Vatsyayana as a subtle counselor, acknowledging all genders to embrace their sexualities instead of hiding in the closet, where women expressing her sexual desires seem socially undesirable. Kama Sutra makes it a natural tendency and need arising as a part of human personality and carnal needs. People hold shadow selves within them, especially women and the third genders. Theorizing it as a natural phenomena makes it a therapy of accepting who we are and getting in touch with our authentic selves. Additionally, it sets the tone for self-inquiry. Erotic religious imagery as old as Hinduism, the earliest Hindu text, the Rig Veda, reveals in the language of both pleasure and fertility. The Upanishads, which followed a few centuries later, spoke about the Vedic oblation of butter into the fire to the act of sexual procreation. The worshipper, in a sexual embrace with his wife, imagines each part of the act as a part of the ritual of the oblation, while presumably anyone making the offering into the fire could also imagine each action as its sexual parallel. Sensuality continued to keep its foot in the door of the house of religion throughout the history of India. The Kamasutra's ideas about genders are surprisingly modern, and its stereotypes of feminine and masculine natures are unexpectedly subtle. Vatsyayana dismisses with one or two short verses the possibility that the purpose of the sexual act is to produce children. One of the things that make sex for human beings different for sex from animals, he points out, is the fact that human women, unlike animals, have sex even when they are not in their fertile period. Vatsyayana distinguishes human sexuality from animal sexuality in the argument that he puts forward to justify his text. Scholars say, since even animals manage sex by themselves, and since it goes on all the time, it should have to be handled with the help of a text. Vatsyayana says, because a man and a woman depend upon each other in sex, it requires a method. And this method is learned from the Kama Sutra. The mating of animals, by contrast, is not based upon any method because they are not fenced in. They mate only when the females are in their fertile season and until they achieve their goal. And they act without thinking about it first. Here we see how Vatsyayana acknowledges the collective animal consciousness and shows how humans evolve out of it. Given the enormous emphasis that the traditional text of Hindu religious law, dharma, place on having sex only to produce children, the Kama Sutra's attitude here is extraordinary. It is also extraordinary in assuming that women would and should know this text. A woman should study the Kama Sutra and its subsidiary arts before she reaches the prime of her youth, and she should continue if her husband wishes it. Scholar says, since females cannot grasp text, it's useless to teach women this text. Vatsyayana says, but women understand the practice, and the practice is based on the text. It applies beyond the specific subject of the Kama Sutra, for throughout the world, in all subjects, there are only a few people who know the text, but the practice is within the range of everyone. Vatsyayana is also a strong advocate for women's sexual pleasure. He tells us that a woman who does not experience the pleasures of love may hate her man and leave him for another. Vatsyayana here is attempting to bring repressed and suppressed and maybe even depressed thoughts to the individual conscious levels by telling women seeking pleasure is her right and that she should give up on the man if not pleasurable for her. If, as the context recommends, this woman is married, the casual manner in which Vatsyayana recommends that she leaves her husband actually seems to be far ahead of those traditional times of India. Book 3 devotes to giving advice to virgin girls to get husbands and ways and means that men should approach virgins. Vatsyayana recommends various qualities that a man and woman should have. For example, material wealth, physical appearance, and family background. He sets compatibility as a very important criterion. He was aware that marriage is a long-term goal and novelty of sex will wear off, so long-term wedding goal of compatibility is recommended by him. He wanted the couple to make their choices as per the wish of the heart in matters of the heart. He is a different sort of a Cupid, according to me, who recommends ways and means of marketing the woman to the man and vice versa. He also emphasizes on the couple spending quality time and entertainment time, bonding much before and even after marriage. For this emphasis on culture and aesthetics was laid in addition to mere sexual congress. The couple was taught to play mind games with each other, amuse around, including foreplay, before getting sexually intimate. He wanted them to create drama, sexual drama, bond well, tease, have fun, sort of create a mystery before getting sexually intimate. They're making the entire sexual drama into a sport, Leela. Consent in sex was important to him, but it need not be vocal always. It can be non-verbal too. A man had to gauge her moves while making advances. Sensitivity towards women can be seen as he advises men not to force themselves on women, but to ensure she's enjoying the act. He wanted men to win a woman's confidence besides heart so that she doesn't dislike sex nor starts dating another man. Gifting was seen as an important pleasing act, but a very important clause attached was to gift only what a man can afford. Vatsyayana recommends that women to be given independence by choosing her groom for marriage by making attempts to search for someone on her own. This would make women happy in the long term that they acquired a spouse by their own decision. Subsequently, he was also cautious to tell women that if they make too many and liberal sexual advances to get a groom, it might show them in poor light and women's chances to attract a good and decent groom might be low. Kama Sutra also covers and recognizes the rape mentality. Her mouth says no, but her eyes say yes. A dangerous line of thought that leads ultimately to places where we now no longer want to be, disregarding a woman's protest against physical abuse. Indeed, Vatsyayana lists rape as one of the worst, but still acceptable as one of the 8 wedding devices. He also takes for granted the type of rape that we now call sexual harassment, as he describes men in power who can take whichever women they want. The text does go on to argue that women have less concern for morality than men have, and has assumed that women don't think about anything but men. And it is written in the service of the hero, the would-be adulterer, who reasons if all women are keen to give it away, why shouldn't one of them give it to him? But the author emphatically imagines various women's reasons not to commit adultery. And the would-be seducer takes the woman's misgivings seriously, if only to disarm her. Here are the other causes of a woman's resistance: love for her husband, regard for her children, the fact that she is past her prime, or overwhelmed by unhappiness, or unable to get away, etc., etc., etc. The passage then concludes that woman should reach her climax first. Why? The commentator explains the best case is when the man and women achieve their sexual pleasure at the same time, because it is an equal coupling. But if it does not happen at the same time, the woman should be treated with kisses, embraces, and so forth in such a way that she achieves her sexual pleasure first. Most extraordinary is Vatsyayana's attitude to people who engage in homosexual acts. Classical Hinduism is in general significantly silent on the subject of homoeroticism. The Dharma textbooks either ignore or stigmatize homosexual activity. Male homoerotic activity was punished, albeit mildly, a ritual bath or payment of a small fine, and this is mentioned in Kautilya's Arthashastra in great detail. And that would be a sufficient atonement. The Sanskrit word kliba was traditionally been translated as eunuch, and almost certainly did not mean eunuch. The Kamasutra speaks instead of a third nature, or perhaps a third sexuality, a third gender, in the sense of sexual behavior. There are 2 sorts of third nature, in the form of a woman and in the form of a man. The one in the form of a woman imitates a woman's dress, chatter, grace, emotions, delicacy, timidity, innocence, frailty, bashfulness. The act that is generally done in the sexual organ is done in her mouth, and they call that as oral sex. She gets her sexual pleasure and erotic arousal, as well as her livelihood from it, living as a courtesan. That is the person of the third nature in the form of a woman. The Kama Sutra says nothing more about this cross-dressing male, which is stereotypical female gender behavior, but it discusses the fellatio technique of the closeted man of the third nature in considerable sensual detail. Various ways in which the Kama Sutra's implicit claim to sexual totality might be opted out into a vision of greater gender infinity. The Kama Sutra was a revolutionary document for women and people of the third gender. Radhava Vallapalli Tripathi states that Vatsyayana also talks of masturbation, homosexuality, and eunuchs. They are to him aberrations, abnormalities, and diversions. He does not condemn them, rather, like a scientist, attempts analysis of the conditions leading to them. Unlike Freud, Vatsyayana did not hold sex as a phenomenon which pervades each and every layer of human psyche. Neither does he advocate psychoanalytic therapy. Freud attached undue importance to a very physical aspect of life, sex. Freud is accused of a preoccupation and even obsession with sexuality. Vatsyayana was aware of the sexual shadows we held within us, which were both personal unconscious and collective unconscious shadows. By acknowledging and writing about sexual shadows, he was trying to bring the repressed, suppressed, and depressed thoughts to the conscious levels, address them, and then the reader could get an insight into the therapy with self-awakening, self-realization through the triggering of the self-inquiry process. The concepts of application of sex have undergone tremendous distortions in all cultures. Most of the human beings remain preoccupied with the idea of sex, but feel uneasy and uncomfortable to talk about it. Divested of its sublimity, sex is being confined to low gossips and cheap or vulgar talk. Sex is being wrestled as a devil or being worshipped as a god. Vatsyayana strikes a balancing note by accepting sex, as well as relating it to spirituality, as well as materialistic values. Healthy sex leads to harmony between body and soul, between physical life and spiritual life. Love is born, but sensuality can be cultivated. Sensuality makes the experience of sex joyous. It makes a man or a woman alive to the rhythms of the body and to create music of life out of it. Charlotte Davis Castle echoes Vatsyayana's concept of karma when she says sexuality is something we each possess and have available for our pleasure, whether or not we are with a partner. The book categorically states that kings and high officials should not have access to the abodes of others, and since their mode of living is constantly watched and observed and imitated by the people at large, therefore persons in authority should not therefore do any improper act in public, as such are impossible from their position and would be deserving of censures. Now, what sets Book 6 apart from the other books of the Kama Sutra is that it appears to be written for the courtesan. Donegal and Kakkar in their translation brings out the ambivalence of the courtesan's loyalty when they point out that although courtesans appear to be faithful and affectionate towards her lover at all times, yet she is often involved with more than one man. It is revealed from the text that the courtesan's main concern is profit, although she makes it appear to her lover that he is her top priority. Danielo considers the relation between lover and courtesan not permanent and lasts only as long as she can squeeze money. In part 6, there are enough ways recommended to the courtesan about how she should conduct herself and her business, thereby also educating and counseling women about financial independence through prostitution. Sex is always intertwined with cultural values. It is an expression of eternal love. It is an appropriation of human potential and correct application of which can be transformed into supreme bliss. Spirituality transforms sex into a blissful and wholesome experience. Modern psychologists agree that there is a holy center in the complex nature of human consciousness. It leads to a human being to lead a life of honesty and integrity. Love springs from it, and this love finds expression in sex act also. This inculcation of spirituality emerges out of love, ultimately makes sex something extremely valuable and imbued with rich human experience. Vatsyayana takes into account various aspects of sex in relation to human life. That is, sex embodying spirituality, sex emanating from complexes, anger, hatred, etc. Sex coming out of from vacuum or aloofness, sex performed as mere routine, a duty, an unwilling submission to some other. Sex done with a desire to feel important, to exhibit power. Sex as an escape from reality, for relief from tension and to hide feelings. Devoid of its spiritual value, sex may become an obsession, maybe an addiction. The holistic approach of Vatsyayana is reflected in the idea of integrated sexuality, where sex is viewed as an intimate and loving experience and a means to enhance mutual confidence and care. In my final conclusion, I'd like to say, in a nutshell, the book's various expositions come from the author's personal experience and his well-bred study of practices of carnal pleasure. Vatsyayana, through his work, the Kama Sutra elevates the society at least from the ethical and moral sphere to sphere of carnal pleasure, of spiritual and cultural nature, where pursuits of karma is humanized to a larger extent. It handles many aspects with socio-cultural ethical points of view as he attempts to enlighten, educate, and counsel its readers to embrace all their sexual shadows. We see Vatsyayana as, or maybe I see Vatsyayana as a philosophical counselor who through his work is building a conversation with the reader, guiding about various aspects of one's sexual life problems. He provides stories, anecdotes, examples by identifying, examining, and revising necessary the operating beliefs, values, and habits of action. He builds the process of identifying readers' implicit truths and values and making them explicit, improves self-awareness, and puts them in a position to clarify and critically examine the fundamental principles that have been guiding their sexual lives. His process of critically examining sexual truths and values analyzes the reasons and evidences that support their beliefs, discover the strengths and weaknesses, as well as the benefits and challenges of their ways of thinking, behaving, and compare them with alternative moral and ethical perspectives. This will help the readers to become aware of inconsistencies between beliefs and conflicts, throw light on sexual moral dilemma and habits of action. These revelations help the reader to become aware of instances in which they might be working at cross purposes with themselves. At the end, there comes a stage of revision, of one's creative rebuilding, in which the reader's core truths and values shift, expand, and sharpen with the consideration of various perspectives from ancient Indian philosophical wisdom traditions. This will lead to a stage of application in which the reader experiments with putting new ideas about sexuality, not just sexual positions, into practice and works to direct their actions, relationships, and ways of communicating with intentional choice. The reader can become empowered to solve their own sexual moral dilemmas and develop their own ways of looking at it, guide themselves in future, and live out their sexualities with greater self-knowledge and awareness. But having said this, towards the end of the Kamasutra, Vatsyayana says, and I quote him, about these things that cannot be either enumerations or any definite rule. Congress having once commenced, passion alone gives birth to all the acts of the parties. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am, for this wonderful presentation. And I know you said that you had a lot to say, but you have in fact completed perfectly on time. And
Thank you. Thank you.
It was really amazing how you began the paper, and then in the end, when you talked about how Vatsyayana was a philosophical counselor, all the blocks just came back into a line and fell into a correct order, and that was amazing to experience. So we're opening the question and answer. Thank you, ma'am. We're opening the question and answer round. So whoever has a question, please type question in the chat box, and we'll get to your question. Ma'am, till the time people are coming up with their questions, I do have a question of my own again. So we talked about how Vatsyayana says that a man should be in order to be more attractive towards a woman. So does he also mention how a woman should be? Because generally we have a woman who should be more attractive. This is what the society has told us, that women should try to be more attractive in order to attract more men. But Kamasutra, as you said, talks about how a man should try to be more attractive so that women get attracted to him. Does he also talk about women?
So, Meka, in the animal kingdom, the male looks far more attractive than the woman, and I think Vatsyayana started from there. Coming to the point wherein do women have to have certain things? Yes, they have to be trained in 64 arts. And these arts will help them to get the perfect man. He has set a separate set of rules for virgin women who want to attract mates or partners, but at the same time he also speaks about women who are now married women. So even they need to have different. So besides being physically attractive, and you have to maintain yourself, you have to know and be very well versed with sexual positions. And over here, Vatsyayana even recommends women that, see, you have to practice it, and you don't necessarily have to do it all out with another man. You can maintain your chastity, you can maintain your virginity by just practicing with your best friend or your aunt, somebody who would be a close confidant. And so that when she is there for the man is not feeling uncomfortable sexually, and even she's at ease with herself, because usually traditionally women are supposed to be shy, and they are supposed to have lajja. Lajja means that they have it's not shame, but it is being shy. Even though she may want it, yet she will say a no. And that is how he actually creates this entire drama. Oh, and by the way, those 64 arts, it's not just about knowing sexual positions, but knowing how to sew and stitch, etc., managing household expenses. So even knowledge of economics was very important for her, because apparently she had to run the house, and at the same time he tells her you must save money as well. You cannot go on spending. So there are, and these 64 arts would actually even economically empower her. Though I did present some views on the courtesan, and prostitution. But at the same time, it was telling her, well, if you have to sustain and survive without a man, if you have to make money, then why not make money out of those 64 arts that you have been well trained by? I hope I have been able to throw some light on what you asked me.
Yes, ma'am. And it also kind of shows how the different books like Arthashastra, Dharmashastra are all related, because in here also he's talking about economic, which is a
Yes,
prospect of Artha. Right. So thank
true,
you,
very
ma'am.
true. Most welcome.
Thank you. There's a question from Dr. Raja. Dr. Raja, could you
Yes.
please ask your question?
Yes, thank you very much. Very, very interesting, and you sort of a lot of stereotypes that sort of just were blown, right, in a way. And I mean that he was blowing, or Vatsyayana was blowing out of it, out of existence back then, perhaps, or maybe we have sort of wrong conception of what things were like back then. That is of course also possible. But so I mean, there was a lot of stuff going on in the presentation. Of course, some of it was just showcasing how interestingly revolutionary, in a sense, what Vatsyayan says is with respect to even contemporary practice and understanding. But also in terms of, I mean, it seems like a very rich resource for philosophical counseling in a particular kind of area, right? I mean, relationship counseling and so on, sex therapy and all that. So what do you think? And for me personally, I think this idea of a shadow was really quite interesting, particularly interesting to bring that in touch with Kamasutra. What would you think are for the practice of philosophical counseling? What would you think are the most important bits that one could take in a contemporary context out of that source, that rich source material?
Thank you, Dr. Raju. Besides being a philosophy professor, I also happen to be a holistic healer, and I do something called as spiritual counseling. And a lot of times, I have come across cases wherein the man is having a moral dilemma. Should I opt for an extramarital affair or not? Yeah, would that be right? Would that be wrong? In India, we are particularly very conscious about karma, action, and particularly negative action, which will sow seeds in the future, wherein I will have to take another birth, reincarnate, transmigrate, and I will come back, and maybe today I have been disloyal to someone. Maybe in my next birth somebody else will be disloyal to me. So there is a lot of such kind of dilemma doing rounds. One. Secondly, with regard to a sex, and particularly because we are talking about philosophical counseling, who knows, we actually might come across people having a lot of sexual moral dilemmas, the way I have. Yeah. And there is a lot of, as you have mentioned, there is a lot of take back. In fact, because of paucity of time, and I wanted to say a lot of things. I was just doing a little here and little there, but then I was trying my best to tie all those ends towards the end, all those loose threads towards the end. So maybe, if we could do some more in-depth analysis and give it probably a chapter by chapter understanding, I think there will be a lot of take back. And we don't only have to look at, see, there are 7 books written. Only book 2 contains sexual positions. That's it. But what happens is that the entire world thinks it is a book on sex positions. Book 2 is the only 2. Book 1 speaks about dharma, artha, kama, moksha. So it talks about liberation, and then blending all of these sexual concepts finally into a spiritual weave. I think that is something which is phenomenal, and there is much work that one can do with regard to this particular text and Vatsyayana's view and philosophical counseling. I hope I've been able to throw some light here and there. Thanks.
We have another question from Dr. Sam. Dr. Sam, what's your question?
It's a wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could you talk more about the notion of shadow, please?
Yeah. So shadow, as I said, that it was Jung's point of view. But when I try to, I think you want me to focus hopefully a little more on Vatsyayana and the shadow. Now, with regard to the shadow, this aspect of ourselves needs far more attention because it is something that has been repressed, suppressed deep down. Sometimes we have angers, we have our own angry self, and maybe because of the societal conditioning, what our parents say. At a very young age, I cannot talk about sex. Even after marriage, I cannot talk about sex to my parents, but I can probably talk to my best friend about it, to a close friend about it. It is also better that I speak to a girlfriend about my sexual life than my boyfriend. So it is about acknowledging that these happen to be the basic needs of a human being. Somewhere we forget that sex is also something natural because it's not something that I am doing to my body. There are chemical changes, hormonal changes taking place on their own. Nature tells me now you are ready. Usually, we look upon sex as only a way to have a child, procreation, and full stop. We don't talk about it. More shadows. I'm creating more shadows. I want, as a woman, I want sex, but society tells me a woman cannot demand. A man can, and it is okay for him to, but not for a woman. Now, this is in particular with regard to India. Particularly because we don't talk about sex. In fact, including sexual ethics in a topic. When I told so many people, when they ask me what is your PhD topic, and I say it's sexual ethics, I don't even say Kamasutra. Somewhere I'm myself scared to be stereotyped. And let's be honest, it is something that is bold. Next, I know somebody else will think that I am the one who is probably desperate or wanting a sexual act because I'm studying it. More shadows, shadows after shadows, and also because because Jung speaks about collective conscious, unconscious. Somewhere we are taking all of it from the background of the family, society, brain states, because Jung even speaks about brain states, which I wasn't able to cover here. So maybe if we can look at these shadows which are all hidden, maybe if we look at philosophical counseling only of the sexual shadow, because that is what I bring over here. Maybe if we just speak about it, if we deal with that, I think there's a lot of liberation and there is a lot that the world can actually gain out of it. And I think sex sells. So usually in marketing, it is said sex sells, and I come from the corporate world at some point in time. So maybe if we could also project this as a very empowering aspect of philosophical counseling, I think we would be able to do a lot better when it comes to spreading the word around. I hope I've spoken a little about what you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
We have another question from from Aditya sir, Aditya Jadhav.
Okay, thank you, ma'am, for the presentation. I would like to apologize first in the first case if my question goes wrong in some direction. My question is that it is more of trying to understand the last slide, which was more about Vatsyayana being considered, or rather the possibility of Vatsyayana being considered as a philosophical counselor. So when we are talking about counseling, it involves a subject and it involves a counselor. Here, in this case, we are considering a text or a compilation of text. The follow-up question is that, is it the case that whenever supposedly you're reading of Vatsyayana and a person who has no clue about what philosophy is, that person is reading of Vatsyayana's Kamasutra, would it be highlighting the same things or would it be something different? And if yes, then what would be the like? Can you just clarify the usage of the word?
So, Aditya, thank you so much. And you are absolutely right in the way you have articulated the questions. It hasn't stirred any negative emotion within me. Okay, so smile. Now, Aditya, the point that I'm going to focus on over here happens to be where you said that my reading versus somebody else's reading. Yeah, would there, will there be a kind of a synthesis, or both of us arriving at the same point? Let me tell you, Aditya, this is where sadly, the world did not understand Kama Sutra too well, because when it came to translation, yeah, Sanskrit to English, the first translation ever happened to be, it was given by Sir Richard Burton. And the way he translated the Kama Sutra, because he had no knowledge of Sanskrit, he took the help of some locals who had some knowledge, and they were translating to him in the way that they could, and he wrote it down in his way. So yes, the translations matter a lot. But then if you read the more modern translations like Sudhir Kakkar and Danielo and some others, yeah, they go word by word and they have knowledge of Sanskrit. So I guess knowledge of the primary language would have made a lot of difference. One. Secondly, well, Aditya, there is a possibility I'm looking at the text as a very progressive text, but somebody else might read it and say this is dirty stuff. Yeah, to use dirty in a different context. I'm sure you understand me over here. So maybe it would, because these happen to be interpretations of the text. By the way, towards the even though Aditya, he says that I have done a patchy work, I have taken little here, little there, and that is how I have the Kama Sutra. But what is most interesting is after every chapter, he puts down a quote and he says, "This is what I am saying. This is what," and throughout he will do a kind of a comparison. Throughout he'll say, "This is what they have said, but this is what I have said." And every time that he says, "This is what I have said," he has said something far more progressive, something that will entail a number of shadows and set them free, liberate them. So you must read the text. That's it.
Thank you, ma'am, for this amazing presentation and new outlook on Kama Sutra. And I'm especially touched by it because I was in Jai Hind College for my 11th and 12th, and I'm very excited that you're here.
So
I think
nice.
that, thank you. I think Amy White raised her hand. Do you have a question?
No, I did the clapping emoji.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
So, Ivan, sir, do you have a question?
Yes.
Yeah, please ask your question, sir.
Yeah, good evening. Good day, right? I don't know where in India.
Good day.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I had a friend that was very anxious every time they were gonna have sex with their significant others, and so and they would get very anxious and stuff like that. And so I did not help them. And at that time, I wasn't a philosophical counselor, right? I mean, but now looking back at what was going on with their anxiety, it was that looks like they suffer from what we call in logic-based therapy some kind of achievement perfectionism, where you demand that of yourself to always or nearly always achieve or perform at a certain level. Otherwise, there's something wrong with you. There is something wrong with your value as a human being. And so it struck me that that's what he was going through, that he demanded this sort of perfect or nearly perfect performance, whatever that means, when it comes to in the sphere of intimate relationships. So I have never read the Kama Sutra, and I really thank you for introducing it to me, at least to me. And so, but I guess my question is, how would the Kama Sutra advise someone like that? I mean, what sort of antidotes or capsules of wisdom would one be able to extract from the Kama Sutra that could help someone who is suffering from this form of achievement perfectionism or performance perfectionism in the realm of their intimate relationships? Like, they demand perfect or nearly perfect performance of themselves in this realm. I mean, any antidotes, any capsules of wisdom that you think that for example, if I were to read the Kama Sutra, I might get from it to help people who suffer from this type of perfectionism?
So, Ivan, thank you for those lovely comments, and I'm so glad that at least you said that you are inspired to read the text. So I feel achieved over here. Secondly, coming deeper focus into what you have said. So the book 7 of the Kama Sutra, it speaks about all types of concoctions that one can take if one wants to be perfect in their sexual act. And maybe if you are aging, if you want a better erection and things like that, then you should take those kinds of aphrodisiac remedies. But then he also says that there will be people who will never be satisfied with what they have done, sexually satisfied. But at the end of the day, you know that you have done your bit in terms of satisfying the other, and especially this goes for a male, because he says that when the woman is satisfied, her eyes roll up. Okay, in book 5, he's in book 2, he says that the eyes roll up. So basically he's saying that what if her eyes don't roll up? It still means that you have done what you had to. It is ultimately a matter of how the body, the mind, and the spirit of the two come together in union. And I guess, maybe if you and me, both of us, we could read it a little more, then probably we can come up, because I'm sure that there are pearls of wisdom even for those who want sexual intimacy to be the most perfect act. But hell, he says it will never be the most perfect act. It is always in your mind, because you always want that kind of or you want to live in this illusion, because when he talks about the courtesans in book 6, he says that even though they have mastered all of them, yet at some point in time the body gets old, and then she will be replaced by the man, and there will be somebody else. So you might as well make hay as in the pleasurable hay desires, fulfill them as much as possible till you are in the prime. And when you are not, take those aphrodisiac remedies that he gives, and they are extremely wild. And there are occult practices also, which I think we should not get into, at least as of now at this stage. And maybe probably with some more academic knowledge we can take it forward. I hope I've given you something as a response, Ivan.
Yeah, so it looks to me that there are resources within that particular book of the Kama Sutra to basically instill in a counselee who is suffering from this type of perfectionism, what we call in logic-based therapy metaphysical security. And so, we're sort of becoming comfortable with the fact that this idea of demanding perfection in the realm of intimate relations it's an irrational demand, right? And so, and that even that you want to do well, and in that realm, that somehow that demand needs to be abandoned, right? And you and adopt more healthy attitudes towards yourself and your partner and the intimate relationships and what you can expect in that realm. Thank you very much.
Most welcome.
Thank you, ma'am, for your wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Meena.
This brings us to the end of the second session of today.